Are you tired?
I'm exhausted. I am truly exhausted.
Throughout this trial, the one objection that seems to be most uttered most often is the objection about hearsay. Do you now know what hearsay is?
I have a handle on it, I think.
And is hearsay when somebody offers something that somebody else said?
Yes.
You began your testimony talking about a memory hole. Is that right?
That's right.
And so there's a space of time that you remember there are things that you remember and things that you don't.
Objection leading.
I'll allow that question.
That's true.
So as we kind of go through these things, can we talk about things that you remember? And if you don't remember,
Yes.
has that been a struggle?
Oh, I think I've missed that mark on so many occasions. This has been so frustrating. I realize that that the day of June 2nd, not only is there a memory hole, but I have a hard time making it clear what I actually remember, what people have told me, what I have read, and what I know to be our family routine. I also feel like part of the memory hole, before the psychiatrist, before the psychologist, before everybody came in and had a theory, part of the memory hole was from the fact that the day just didn't matter to me. It was totally irrelevant until Maxine called me. When Maxine called me, my day began. All the rest of the stuff was just stuff. It was a black cloud of nothing. But when Maxine called me, my day became alive. And I can tell you what happened from that point on. I just can't tell you what happened to any clarity before that.
We've heard some testimony about writers living in two worlds, one kind of in the world with their characters and one in the real world.
Yes.
Before Maxine called, where were you?
Oh, I was definitely in my writing world. I was living in a little bubble,
After Maxine called on June 2nd, were you back in your writing bubble?
Not at all. Not at all.
Were you still in a different kind of world?
One of terror.
I want to, you said that you bought the gun kit on December 24th of 2017.
Yes.
Is that right? And I think the states introduced some exhibits to show the time that happened.
Yes.
I want to show you what's been marked as Defendants Exhibit 228. We showed this to Ms. Medlin, but I'm wondering if you can identify it. What is this?
This is the route from Avamere, which is in the lower part of the screen, to our house in the upper part of the screen.
Okay, and how long does it take to get from Avamere to your house?
Depending on traffic, I would say anywhere from 5 minutes to 7, 8, 9 minutes, maybe.
The defense would move to admit Exhibit 228.
No objection.
228's admitted.
There was a lot of back and forth about why you bought the slide on eBay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
That's right.
And I think you testified, but I want to be clear on this. You testified that there had been a conversation with Dan in which he didn't think it was a good idea to take the Glock entirely apart.
No, he thought that was a very bad idea.
For you to do it in particular.
Yeah.
So why did you buy the extra slide and barrel?
Because I could take that apart and play with it.
And you said that the slide and barrel in your mind went with the gun kit.
Yes. Yes, there was a big separation between what was writing and what was for protection.
Okay. There was a description about where the slide and barrel was kept in your closet.
Yes.
Where was the slide and barrel kept in your closet?
It's a fairly decent sized closet, and I had an armoire here. And on, beside the armoire was the gun case and the
Gun case?
gun case for the put it together gun and the, I'm sorry, I'm losing words here, and the slide and barrel. So they were all kind of together in this little area.
Where was the put, as you call it, the put together gun, or the gun that had already, the real gun?
The real gun was across the closet. It was on a higher shelf, and it was tucked behind clothes so it couldn't be found easily.
Did you ever use the slide and barrel that you bought with the Glock 17 that you bought?
No,
Did you ever?
they were two different things. One was for riding and playing, and one was for protection.
Did you ever use the slide and barrel with the gun kit? Did you ever use the slide and barrel in the gun kit, I guess I should say?
No,
When do you last remember seeing the slide?
I haven't seen the slide forever. I'm not sure I saw it. I'm not sure I saw it even before Dan died. It could have been I did, but I don't have a memory of that. What I can tell you is that my closet was a jumbled mess for 3 months while we decided what we needed to keep of Dan's, what we needed to throw away. There was stuff everywhere. Did I answer your question? or
You
I
did.
wander
I'm
off?
sorry. I was just trying to think of my next question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I thought maybe I'd wandered off topic again.
When did you start packing up boxes after Dan died?
I didn't start packing up boxes after Dan died. Susan did. And it was because Susan was here and she could see by looking at our storage building, we'd already started packing boxes.
I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but I'm just kind of trying to get a sense of timing. When in the summer did boxes begin to get packed?
I'm going to guess maybe 3 weeks after Dan died that Susan had started on stuff.
Okay, but how many people total were involved in that effort?
Oh, as close as I can get to a count, I think it was 35.
How many weeks or months did it take to get the boxes packed?
They weren't packed by the time I was arrested, so that was September 5th. I mean, I still had a slew of stuff that was in the basement, that was in the upstairs office, that was next to the bed, that hadn't been packed at all.
Okay. But there were many boxes that were packed and taken to storage or taken to pods,
There were.
and many boxes that were packed up and sent home with other people or to other homes.
I think I would describe it differently than boxes that were packed up. I would describe it, we gave away a lot of things that, particularly things that I thought Dan would have wanted somebody to have. I tried to make sure that they get that, that they would, and particularly if he had made it, such as his canned goods or his Northwestern sauce or his habanero sauce, or if it was something he truly valued. Like at one point, Karen and Jack called me and said, we would like a T-shirt. Dan wore T-shirts all the time, and many of them were funny, but lots of them were garden and environment related. And they said, could you find us a T-shirt or each that we could keep? And I found 2 of his favorites for them, you know?
How many loads of just things that got discarded or debris got hauled away?
Oh, probably 6. And they were, it wasn't a full-size big truck. It was a truck, but it was with high walls, so you could pile it higher, but about 6.
Let me shift gears here. You said something about Susan. There had been, the council asked you a question that suggested that that you and Dan had not been packing up the house or kind of clearing out the house in advance of a sale of the house before Dan died. Is that true?
No, No, I started in places where I knew I could start packing things away and it wouldn't be an issue. We had a high boy in the living room that had a lot of the things we bought in Asia that we really had enjoyed, but we were prepared to move them on at this point. And I know I gave a lot of them to Nathaniel and his wife. I gave some to other friends of Dan's who I thought would appreciate what it was.
You rented that storage unit in December, is that right?
I thought it was earlier than that, but you may be right.
Okay, and before that, you talked about some kind of I don't know if you called it a warehouse or something where you'd taken items to sell? Mm-hmm. And what was that?
It was called a garage sale warehouse, and you had a 10 by 10 space, and you put stuff out and price on it and the number of your booth, and then you didn't have to be there for it. They just took the stuff up to the front and purchased it.
So had you rented that for several months?
I think we rented it for 6,
Okay,
but we were done with it by the new year, I'm pretty sure.
okay, so the last 6 months in 2017, you had this warehouse space where
Right.
you'd put a lot of extra items to see if people would buy them. Mm-hmm. And then you purchased or you rented this public storage space.
Yes.
And were you moving items into the public storage space before Dan died?
Oh, yeah. In fact, Dan helped me break down the garage sale stuff, and we had things that we needed to donate out of that, but we also had things we needed to put in the storage and things we needed to deal with. And he and I had done that. I don't think Jack helped. In fact, I'm pretty sure Jack did not help on that
Okay,
one.
so you're talking about moving things from storage to storage. I'm asking you whether you moved things from your home
Oh,
into storage.
I'm sorry. The things I moved from my home were, yeah, we'd started on Susan's room, we'd started on linen closets, we'd started on areas that we thought, we can move this along.
I want to show you what's been marked as Defendants Exhibit 2124. I have to make that a little bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is a text message from your husband. What's the date on this?
3/4 of 18.
Attacking Susan's room with reckless abandon is the question.
Uh-huh.
And so what were you doing from looking at that? What's your best guess about what you were doing on March 4th of 2018?
It was attacking Susan's room with reckless abandon. We had a lot of stuff in there.
Okay. You heard Jack Brophy testify about that room being filled with, I think he called it Dan debris.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes, but I had my own little helping in there.
Was that a room that after Susan moved out just kind of became a room where you put stuff?
Yep.
Okay.
And every so often I'd go in and get it cleaned out, and then we'd begin again to put more stuff in there.
Okay, but back in March of 2018, were you taking things from Susan's room and moving them into storage?
I was.
Council also asked you about March 26th and March 27th, and some of the questions were about cell site location information, but the other question was about, I think you called it States Exhibit 82. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And he suggested that you had, quote, Googled something.
Yes.
Okay, I want to show you what's been marked. Do you remember when Josiah Roloff testified
I
with Ms.
do.
Weinmiller
Yes.
about things that were found on your computer?
Mm-hmm.
I want to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 339. And Mr. Breton, if you would go from pages 3 to 6. Mr. Breton, I have bad eyes. Can you make that a little bigger so I can see some? Starts. If you could make that, I'm sorry, Mr. Breton, if you could make that area in blue just a little bit bigger. Yeah, I can see it better. Oh. So there's an area in blue there, and I think council asked you about supposedly Googling loading a Glock, a 9mm Glock. And can you see over there and can you read the time that happened?
That happened on 3/26 at 10:13:35.
Okay, and what's happening and what's the timestamps on all the YouTubes that go before that?
13:35.
So, and then what about all the ones that come after this loading a Glock? What happens then?
Well, the next three are 35, and then we go to 36. So the next three are in the same second, but the five that follow it are in the next second after following that. So it was 36. There's 36 second.
What after the page after that?
Okay, so we start at the top of the page, and we are at 10:13:36, and we run all the way down the entire page to 10:13:36.
And what about the next page?
That's also 10:13:36, and that runs all the way down that page.
And what about the next page?
It starts at where the blue is highlighted, that's 10:13:36, and after that, the next three are 10:13:45, and the rest of the page is 10:19:38.
Okay, and do you recall Mr. Roloff testifying that this appeared to be an automatic function on the computer as opposed to something that you did on March 26th and March 27th?
I do. I didn't recall it at the time I was asked, but I do now remember it.
Although when when Mr. Overstreet asked you the question about whether you Googled a video, you just agreed with them?
Apparently, I'm an idiot, but ignoring that, apparently I thought it was as an exhibit that had been what we had said.
Okay, but that's because it was something that he told you.
Yes.
Council asked you about, I think you told the story about these little tiny houses that Dan seemed interested in. And he asked you whether you were going to live in one and Dan was going to live in one.
Yeah, yes, he did.
And what was your answer?
My answer was no. Dan was going to store his junk in one, and we were going to live in the other one.
Did you and Dan Brophy ever talk about separating or ever talk about getting a divorce?
No. No. Yeah, my life would have been so incomplete without him.
When you and Dan had conversations about getting your finances in order, did that ever lead to tension in your relationship or a deterioration of your relationship?
No, no. We both came to the table as adults. One of the nice things about getting older is that you actually get through all the garbage of youth. We came to the table as adults. We both brought ideas to the table. We adapted a combination of ideas. We were both happy. And more than that, we were happy that we'd come up with a solution that would work for both of us.
Council asked you about whether you'd ever been to, I think he called it the Tri-County shooting lane. Have you ever been there?
I don't even know where it is, so no, I've never been there.
If you knew that it was a private membership club, did anyone ever invite you to go there?
No,
Are you a member of the Tri-County Club?
no. And neither was Dan.
You testified about a time that Dan started to, well, before I ask you that, let me just talk about one other thing. The Bra phone credit card thing, can you, you testified that something wouldn't have happened because you didn't have a bra on, so you wouldn't have had your phone. And I got confused by that. Can you explain what that meant?
I'm in pajamas. I'm in a nightshirt. And I know there are women who sleep in their bras because they think they're defying gravity, and that just never happens. But I don't. And so when I got up, I threw on tights. I didn't have a bra on. I didn't grab my phone. I didn't grab the stuff that I grab that I keep with me all the time when I need it because I wasn't going anywhere. I'm in
Okay.
pajamas.
All right. And again, I want to talk to you about things that you remember, things
Right.
that you think might have happened based on a routine, and
Right.
things that you have been told.
Right?
Getting up and being in your nightshirt and not wearing a bra and not having your phone, is that something, where is that on our continuum?
And on our continuum is that is routine. That is not what I remember. That is routine.
I want to show you Defendants Exhibit 383, and I'll ask you a couple of questions. You remember, we were talking about the AmeriCorps policy, and council asked you whether, in fact, that was a policy that would have just terminated if you took the return of premium cash out
Yes?
that came with that policy.
Yes, and I told him that I was pretty sure I didn't think it would, but I could be wrong.
Okay. So, Mr. Breton, if you would first kind of scroll down. Can you, yeah, right there. Can you see Ms. Brophy on that table, that insurance annual premiums table? Can you see where all of a sudden the death benefit jumps up to $154,756?
Yes, I can.
And that's when someone reaches the age of what?
78.
Okay, and if you would go back up to the top, Mr. Breton. Under the description of the coverage, there's a phrase that says insurance policy endowment at the age of 100.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
What that means is that this policy could continue to 100 if I paid the premiums, but it doesn't mean the premiums will necessarily stay the same.
Okay, but that if you wanted to take the money
Right?
and keep the $100,000 benefit,
Right?
that was available to you so long as you were willing to pay the premium until Dan reached the age of 100?
Yes.
You talked about after Dan, you kind of toyed with the little house idea or the tiny house idea, or at least Dan did. You talked about going to Portugal and being an expat. You talked about maybe trying to find, or maybe staying on your property and separating it in half.
Right?
You also talked about different places that you could move outside of the city,
Right?
and maybe have still a little bit of land without the mortgage.
Yes.
Okay. And I think you testified that things began to gel after Dan, or gel, and it sounds like things never really quite gelled, but you started to focus more on at least one option after Dan had visited Delilah Marvell's property near Banks.
Yes.
And do you know when it was that your husband toured Delilah Marvell's property?
I'm going to say 2016, and it was a nice day, and we were all walking around on the land, so I'm going to say it was summer.
Can you tell us about where things stood on June 2nd, 2018, about the kind of property you and Dan wanted to find?
Yeah, I think we were pretty clear by then what we wanted. We wanted someplace that was, as we say loosely, halfway to the coast. Dan wanted to be near mushroom hunting. Dan wanted to be able to go to the coast easily. Dan wanted a little property. Now, how much of the little property was still wildly in flux? I knew we wanted more than a half acre, But I wasn't sure Dan really wanted more than 2 acres because he wanted to garden it and not feel like it was so much. And he may have looked at property and said, as we got serious about it, and said, no, this is too much, this is, or he may have looked at 5 acres and said, oh, hey, I've got a plan. That was still up in the air. But what we wanted, as much as anything else in the world, was something that we could pay cash for and not have a mortgage.
I just have one last question, Ms. Brophy.
Okay?
Was your relationship, or 2 questions, I guess, was your relationship strained with Dan Brophy on June 2nd of 2018?
Not at all.
Had your marriage deteriorated in any way by June 2nd of 2018?
Not at all. We were planning our next vacation, and we had a plan to make it work, and we were moving forward. In fact, in some ways, I think it was one of the happiest periods of our lives.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, you can put your mask back up and step down.
Thank you.
And the defense next witness.
Defense will recall Sergio Perez.
Okay. All right, Mr. Perez, we'll have you come on up again, just like the last time, and step on into the witness box. And if you can stay standing, my clerk will give you an oath again.
Okay, I'll ask you to please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then you may be seated and you may remove your mask. And then again, if we could have you please state and spell your first and last name.
My name is Sergio Perez, Sergio Perez.
All right, when you're ready.
Thank you. Welcome back, Mr. Perez. So you testified, I can't remember now, maybe the week before last? It's starting to run together. After you testified, or while you were testifying, did you realize that it might have been helpful to have a couple more exhibits to explain what you were talking about?
Yes, there were some details that were necessary to clarify some aspects of the exhibit that we showed at that time.
Okay, well, and did you prepare a couple more exhibits to assist with that?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Brett, would you pull up Exhibit 365, please? Now, do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
What was your purpose in preparing this one?
This was to clarify the field of view of the camera. So each camera can capture certain area from the location is installed. So the chart will show exactly what the camera was recording, and the chart are at a level, at a ground level view.
Okay, so let's go through this. Would you go to the first frame or the next frame? Which camera is this showing us?
This one is an affinity property, and as you can see, it has a strange shape, but that's because the camera has obstacles in front of it. So those are physical obstacles at the ground level that doesn't allow you to see like for example, on the left side, there is a wall. So you don't see on the other side, or you don't see the corner, for example, because of the trees and the wall. So that's why it has that shape. That's what you actually can see in the recording at ground level.
Okay, and that camera was in a fixed position, so that was the field of vision that's shown for all of the videos that you reviewed from Affinity?
Yes, it's right at the corner of behind the building. So you can see where the camera is installed, back of the building, right there.
Okay, let's go to the next frame. Which one does this show us?
This one is at Starbucks. This one is inside the store. So that's why you see the shape that is covering inside the building. And in this case, the physical obstacles for the camera are the windows from the store. So the camera can record just what the images that are coming from the outside the store and part of the inside of the store.
Okay. Was that camera also fixed throughout all of the video that you reviewed from Starbucks?
Yes, yes.
Right. Okay, what about the next frame?
This one is the Velayos store. This one also is recording part of the inside, the front door of the store, and also the street. And the angle that can cover the field of view is wider because the windows allow for that. And you can see up to the corner in front of the street. So there is a crossing, so you can see up to there. And on the right side, you can see up to where the bicycles are parked across the street, so you can cover a wide range of the sidewalk in front.
All right, and when you were here last time, we did not play the Bellagio's video, is that
No,
correct?
we didn't.
But there was a Bellagio's video in which you were able to ascertain Mr. Taylor?
Yes, yes.
All right, let's go to the next frame.
This one is the store East Side Delhi. The store has two cameras. This one is camera 2, and it can record the inside the store, but also through the windows, it can record the street. And so also in this case, the field of view is limited by the windows and the ceiling of the store. So that's why you cannot see further on the street. And in this camera, because it's recording part of the front of the store, we're able to see Mr. Taylor while he was crossing the street there.
Okay, and then we did see one video last time you were here from East Side Delhi. Was that from this camera?
No.
It was kind of a blurry one?
Oh, yes, from this camera. Yes,
Okay.
It has a different color. It's not completely full color.
Okay, and then you mentioned that there's a second camera on East Side.
Yeah,
Go to the next frame, Mr. Britton.
That's camera 3, and this one points more to the corner of the street. So if a person, for example, is trying to cross 18th Avenue going west, the camera will capture the person standing up there. And also this camera, the field of view is also limited by the windows of the store. So around the corner, the camera can record the front entrance of the store and a little bit of the side.
Okay, and last time, I think in conjunction, now, did we see the video from this camera last time?
No.
Okay, there was a video that you showed, another very grainy video of Mr. Taylor walking across Jefferson. Do you recall that?
Yes.
That was from the TriMet station, just off frame here to the left.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Britton, would you go to the next frame? Now, you've included another one here, and it looks like that's a block back. That's looking down Columbia rather than Jefferson, correct?
Yes.
Which camera is that?
This one is the PGE camera. There is a substation there from PGE, and they have a camera right next to the fence on Columbia Street.
Okay. Did you pick up Mr. Taylor on that camera?
No. In this camera, as you can see, the field of view also is kind of weird because of the obstacles, but you can see the corner of the street. So you can see the two pedestrian crossings, and you can see the corner. So if the person is turning there, you can also see that.
Okay. Now, you had some discussion or some conversation last time with Mr. Overstreet about where Mr. Taylor went in a certain point in time, and you had indicated that perhaps he turned right and went north on 17th, and he was questioning you about how you knew he hadn't gone south on 17th. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
And I think in substance, you said he could have gone south a certain amount, but sooner or later he would have gotten picked up on another camera.
Yes. And this is the camera. Yes.
This is the one you were thinking about.
Yes.
So he could have gotten about most of the way down that block
Yes.
on 17th, but not past that
Yeah.
without getting picked up.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, let's look at those. I think there were 3 videos you said we didn't see last time.
Yes.
Look at those 3. Mr. Breton, I think the first is 334, the Bellagio's video. .334, sorry. And what time did you determine this one was taken?
So this one is 7:18, so it's 3 hours before. I mean, the time is 3 hours ahead, and the blue trash bin is there. So Mr. Taylor is behind the wall, and here you can see what the camera can capture. And at the left upper corner is the corner on the of the street, across the street. So when a person is crossing there, you can see the person there crossing, going west or coming east.
Okay. All right. And then, Mr. Breton, let's go to Exhibit 336. Now, which camera is this?
This one is the one at the east side daily. This is the one at the corner. So it's capturing more the corner of the street compared to the other one that is more to the side. And so here also when a person is turning or is going to cross the street there, you can see the person. And the field of view, as you can see, is limited by the windows and the ceiling. So you cannot see further away.
Now, is that, it looks almost like there's that traffic circle at 18th and Jefferson. Is that what we're looking at in the far side of the top of the frame?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then the church is on the far side of the circle? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's further away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a second video from this as well?
Yes.
Mr. Breton, would you play 337?
So here is Mr. Taylor. A few seconds later, he came back and he shows up in the camera again. And then he goes back and walking on the 18th toward Madison Street.
Okay, and that would be walking north on 18th?
Yes.
All right. All right. Did you also revise that overview that you did that was kind of an aerial view?
Yes, I added some additional details to it.
Okay. Mr. Breton, would you bring up 326? Okay, so if you could, excuse me, I want you to stay oriented this way, but can you use the pointer and just show us kind of the progression and the time? You don't have to go through all of the specifics, but just show us essentially what the series of videos, the ones that you showed when you were here the first time and the ones that we've just looked at, what they tell you about his movements that morning.
Yeah, so Mr. Taylor starts showing up.
Now make sure you're standing and looking that way. I know it's hard.
Yeah, so here is Mr. Taylor arriving to the area that the camera affinity is capturing. So here is him arriving here. He's coming on Jefferson going west over here, and here he shows up on the camera, and he stays there for about 2.5 minutes, and then he leaves at 6:52, and he's walking this way, pulling the blue trash bin.
Okay, and then is this the time that you lose track of him for, what is it, a little bit over 20 minutes?
Yeah, here he's missing for actually 30 minutes,
Okay,
almost 31 minutes. And so we are assuming that he's somewhere in this area.
okay, and he could be somewhere on 17th, but he's probably not going too far either direction on Jefferson. Is that what you're indicating?
Yeah, so there is no camera that can record him if he's from here up to before Starbucks. And also this area, there is no camera. Just if he goes to the corner, but he didn't show up there in this time frame.
Okay. All right, so the camera picks him up again, and at this point, are you certain which side of the street he's on during that 30 minutes? Which side of Jefferson he's on?
Yeah, when he shows up here at Starbucks, he's still on the south side of Jefferson. And you can see him on the camera walking this direction up to the front door of the store.
Okay, and then you showed last time a video from inside the Starbucks. He actually goes into the Starbucks,
Yes,
correct?
he goes inside, he stays there for about 3.5 minutes. And so he's here entering the store. He leaves the blue trash bin outside, and then here he's leaving. He gets a cup of coffee, it looks like, and then he left.
Okay, and then when does he go past the Bellagio's?
Then after about 3 minutes, and the distance is not much. So here is a Starbucks, and here is a Bellagio's, and he shows up here about 3 minutes after. So he stays in this area for those 3 minutes, and then you can see him in the camera at Bellagio's walking in that direction here, going west. So he passes in front of this camera.
Okay, and then what?
So then he crosses the street over here because he's captured by the camera here that is pointing to this area. So the camera is showing him crossing the street over here. Then the other camera captures him here going around the corner.
Okay, so give us again the times. I think you indicated when the video was playing, but specifically with respect to Eastside Deli, those two cameras there were 3 videos in total taken from 2 different cameras, each of which were mounted inside of Eastside Deli, correct?
Yes.
Okay, what is the time range of those 3 videos as he's walking past Eastside Deli and then going north on 18th?
Yeah, so here he shows at the Bellagio's, it's 7:18:25. So then he just stays here at the corner. You can see it in the video. But he stays here for a few seconds, and then he crosses here the street, and he shows up here at 7:18:51. But it's captured by a camera from TimeIt crossing the street. And here is him pulling the cart, 7:19:32.
Okay,
So it's about, because he stays here for a few minutes, so it took 1 minute from the moment he shows up at Bellagio's over here to show up at the camera from TimeIt crossing over here. So about 1 minute.
okay, so the first Bellagio's camera, what time does that pick him up?
7:18
Not Bellagio's, I'm sorry, I meant Eastside Deli.
Oh, so here is already crossing 7:19:51. So it's this camera is capturing him at about the same time that this one.
Okay, and then what's the last sighting? What's the last time that you were able to find him on the video?
It's 7:20:10.
Okay, and that's that sharper, nicer camera that we looked at the end?
Yes. So it's another clip of this one, this camera, and so he disappears from view because he walks this way with the blue trash bin,
Which way? Show us with the pointer. Okay,
this way,
got
but
it.
then he shows up a few seconds later in this same camera, and you saw the video, like him looking around, and then he turns around and walks in that direction again.
So he hesitated for a moment, came back, and then continued on north?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. All right, that's, I think, it for that exhibit. And then I've got some questions for you on an entirely different topic. Did we also ask you to figure out whether you could find a good aerial image that would show the North Fork Wolf Creek public shooting range?
Yes, yes.
And were you able to find one?
Yes, I did a search in internet and I found a video in YouTube.
Objection.
Basis.
There's going to be a matter for the court.
All right. Let's have the jury step out for just a moment. All right, go ahead, Mr. Overstreet.
Your Honor, what we've been provided by defense is a video that was found online by Mr. Perez that is of the Wolf Creek Range. There's a date stamp on it that somebody added on it that says May of 2018, I think, May something of 2018. It's my understanding that Mr. Perez just found this video online. It's not a video he created or knows when it was actually made. And so I don't believe any proper foundation is going to be laid in order to introduce this video to the jury.
All right, in defense.
So, Your Honor, he was able to ascertain that that video was posted on May 14th. The stamp that the creator added to it, the text that's superimposed on top of the video says May 12th, 2018. So it was posted to YouTube 2 days later, which certainly suggests that that May 12th date is correct. This arose initially because we had some photographs that were taken much more recently by one of our investigators of the same range and the same roadways, and Mr. Overstreet was concerned that those were taken so much later after 2018 that perhaps the road conditions had deteriorated in a way that would be misleading to the jury, and so he wanted to know whether we could find some video or some depictions of the road as it would have existed in the spring of 2018. So we have both an aerial photo and this video that were taken much closer in time. And we also, through the investigator, plan to show the photographs that were taken more recently. But it is a fairly long and winding road. And I think because the testimony that the state has presented so far is that the direct line from the cell towers to the shooting ranges was, for one of the towers was 6.51 miles, and the other was 6.57 miles. That ends up creating a misleading impression that it would take, that was the travel distance, when in fact, these exhibits, I think in combination, show that the actual driving time, and this of course would be in combination with the testimony from the investigator as well, that the actual drive time down Highway 26 to get to the intersection with this road, and then the path that one would have to follow on the road to get to the actual shooting ranges is significantly greater than I think the jury would understand from the testimony that's been provided so far.
How long is the video?
Maybe 3 minutes.
Let me first, so the first objection is sort of foundational authentication. I haven't heard what his explanation would be, so why don't let me first hear the answers to the questions about whether or not you can lay a proper foundation for its authenticity. at the particular time frame that we're discussing.
Mr. Perez, were you asked to locate either photographs or videos of Wolf Creek Road and Public Range area as it existed in 2018, or as close as you were able to
Yes,
locate?
yes,
Okay. And then there are two different exhibits that you sent to us, is that right?
yes,
One is an aerial photograph and one is a video that you found on YouTube?
yes.
Okay. You were not involved in directly making either the video or the photograph, were you?
No,
You located both of those through an internet search?
yes. And I downloaded the video as it was using software.
Okay. Did you find that on YouTube?
Yes, in YouTube.
Okay. Do you frequently research YouTube videos and conduct this sort of investigation to try to find things that are appropriate to a particular time frame?
Yes, yes, all the time. That's why I have software to be able to download the original video from YouTube
Okay.
that I find.
Were you, what indicia were there, and what did you rely on in determining that this was a video that was made during the spring of 2018?
Because I found information on the video that it was an activity that a volunteer group that works with an agency from the government, they did a spring cleaning in the area. So it was a schedule. I mean, it was they did it that day. They scheduled to do it on May 12, 2018. So they recorded the whole process of cleaning the area during that day.
Okay.
And
What were you able to tell from the video itself, the posting date of the video and any sort of metadata that was associated with this file that you downloaded? What were you able to ascertain about when it was created or when it was posted?
yeah, the creation date and posting date was the same. It was May 14, 2018. So 2 days after it was recorded.
Okay, so that there's not a timestamp, but there's text that's superimposed on the video that indicates it's something that happened on May 12th?
Yes, they put information, the titles and all that, and when the event happened. So the person that created that put the information on the video.
Okay, but what you could ascertain from the metadata was that it was 2 days later when the video was actually compiled and finalized and then uploaded to YouTube?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, and for the photograph, this aerial photograph, what was your source? Where did you find that?
Google Earth. And
Is that a tool that you work with frequently?
yes, yes.
So were you able to ascertain when that satellite photo, I mean, I'm assuming it's a satellite photo if it's Google Earth.
Yeah, the maps, they provide the date with the map. It was uploaded to Google Earth.
Okay, and what was the date for that aerial photograph, that satellite photo?
Let me see. I don't have the date of the map. It should be on the map, I think.
On the exhibit itself? Let me double check.
But I think it was 2021.
Mr. Breton, that is, the aerial photo is 368. Is the date actually superimposed on that?
No, it doesn't show up on the exhibit. But I know that there was not a map from 2018 exactly.
Show you.
Oh yeah. sorry. Yeah, it was June 2017.
This aerial photo, the
Yes.
satellite photo is from June of 2017?
Yeah, I remember because the next option was 2021, so I downloaded the maps from June 2017.
Oh, so there was almost a 4-year gap?
Yeah, they don't do scans as often as in the cities.
Okay. So those are the questions that I have, Your Honor.
All right. I'm going to sustain the objection. What I'm hearing is that the video was posted on May 14th, but as far as to when it was created, we're relying on information contained within the video and the people who created it and what they're saying on the video. I have no ability to assess that's what it accurately was on May 12th. And then with regard to the Google Earth satellite photo, I'm also sustaining it. All we know is it was uploaded in June of 2017. I don't know if it accurately reflects the way things looked in, I can't remember if we're talking about March or May, but of 2018. So I'll sustain those objections.
And Your Honor, with respect to the aerial photo, really that it's functioning almost like a map. They're roadways that presumably wouldn't have changed, so that I think there is a difference between the two.
Well, why do we presume that? I mean, roads change all the time. They may not have been, but I don't know how I know that. I mean, go ahead, just one Miller.
I mean, there aren't, this image is as close as is available. I mean, we don't have maps that are made every single day of the year, for every year. And I think this is the sort of thing that is routinely relied on. That roadways of this sort don't move often. This was a recently constructed road.
All
And
right.
it does show all of the ranges that show up in the photographs from the investigator.
Well, I'm sustaining the objection to the extent the investigator can testify based on his personal, based on someone's personal experience with this roadway. You may be able to explore it that way, but I'm going to sustain the objections.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's call the jury back.
Sorry, Your Honor, before we do that, I don't know if it would make sense now. I know they're planning to, so we don't have to send the jury out again. They're planning on introducing some recent photographs that were taken through another investigator.
Okay.
We're going to have the same objection that he can't testify that that's what it looked like back in 2018.
Well, okay. I mean, that sounds to be more like a question of cross-examination. It goes to the weight of the evidence rather than whether it's admissible. You know, if his testimony is these are photographs that were taken, I don't know, 2022 of these roads, if you want to argue about their relevance, you can. But as far as if he's not trying to say, if he's not going to testify that that's how the road conditions were in 2018, then frankly, I think it's going to be more an issue of weight rather than admissibility.
Okay.
Okay, we'll call record and I'll mute the WebEx.
I sustain the objection, so Ms. Weinmiller, your next question.
I have no further questions for this witness.
All right, any cross-examination?
Possibly. Mr. Perez, have you actually been up to that area at 17th and Jefferson that you've been speaking of?
Yes,
Did you walk the route that Mr. Taylor had taken that morning?
yes,
And did you notice at the various places where Mr. Taylor is stopping, that there happen to be blue recycling bins and other garbage cans in those areas?
I haven't seen him reaching those places. At the affinity group, there is no trash containers in front of the store.
You agree that he is pulling a blue recycling bin, correct?
Yes,
And when he's in that area of 17th and Jefferson specifically, and he's gone for about 30 minutes,
yes,
you've been to that area.
yes,
On the southeast corner of 17th and Jefferson, there's a place called Potluck in the Park. Do you know what building I'm talking about?
yes,
There's a lot of picnic benches out there
yes,
along the street. And then also a loading dock in front of Potluck in the Park. Is that right?
yes,
And in front of that loading dock, is there not two large garbage cans?
yes.
And is there not a similar blue recycling bin right there?
I have seen just
Okay.
the trash.
And you have no evidence to suggest that Mr. Taylor actually crossed Jefferson, correct?
Yep, yes, that's correct.
Until after Bellagio's.
Yes,
Okay. In fact, after he's done in that area of these garbage cans that I'm talking about, 30 minutes later, you pick him up at Starbucks buying a coffee.
yes,
And then we just watched the Bellagio's video where it appears that that blue can comes to a rolling stop at the corner. Is that correct?
yes,
And it's there for a couple of minutes?
yes.
Are you aware that there's a garbage can right there on that corner?
No, I didn't know that.
You didn't notice that? And then when you cross the street and head up 18th, are you aware that there's more blue bins up 18th, specifically towards Madison?
No, I haven't seen that.
You didn't look? I don't have any other questions.
Well, I didn't hear an answer to the last question.
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay, all right. Redirect?
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank
All
you.
right. You can go ahead and step down. Thank you. Defense, next witness.
Defense calls Grant Stringer.
Okay. All right, Mr. Stringer, we're going to have you come up and go ahead and step into the witness box, but don't have a seat. Just get as close as you can in there to the microphone, and my clerk will give you an oath.
Okay, I'll ask you to please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, then you may be seated and you may remove your mask. And then, because we're being recorded, I'll ask you to please state and spell both your first and last name.
Yeah, it's Grant Stringer, Grant. Stringer is Stringer.
And there is water there if you want any.
Thanks.
But whenever you're ready, Ms. Weinmiller.
Good afternoon, Mr. Stringer. How are you employed?
I'm an investigator on Nancy Brophy's defense team.
All right. And do you have another job?
Yes,
What else do you do?
I'm a journalist.
Have you been working on this case for the last several months?
Yes, since January of this year.
Was one of your assignments to go out and tour and get some measurements at the North Fork Wolf Creek Public Shooting Range?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And you in fact did that?
Yes.
What was the date of your trip out there?
That was on April 26th of this year.
Okay. Were you asked to both measure the drive time and the distance of several sections of that road?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So you took Highway 26 to get out there, I take it?
Yes.
Okay. And does Highway 26 intersect directly with the North Fork Wolf Creek Road?
It does.
Right. from that point forward, once you turn off of Highway 26, are you turning north onto North Fork Wolf Creek Road?
Yeah, north.
Okay. And were you able to find that public range, the shooting range?
Yes.
Is it marked on the highway there?
It is. There's a sign at the intersection for the turnoff off of Highway 26. And it's, yeah, easy to find.
When you turned off, well, I'm going to ask you about the drive time and the distance in just a bit. But were you able to go all the way up to the range
Yes.
and through the range?
Yes.
Okay. Could you describe to us just generally, we're going to go back and look at some photographs, but tell us what the layout is, sort of the route that you followed and how the range itself is laid out?
Yeah, so it's a forested area. This is it's on the Tillamook State Forest, so you'll encounter logging trucks on this road. The gun range is public, it's free, and the lanes are kind of dispersed along this single road in this kind of forested area.
Okay. So when you say they're dispersed, how many lanes are there in total?
There are 4 lanes there.
All right. And are some of them grouped together and some separated, or are they all separated from each other?
Yeah, so lanes 1 and 2 are very close together. Lane 3 is a little bit further down. It's about a quarter mile from lanes 1 and 2. And then the last lane is another quarter mile from lane 3.
Okay. And are they just called lanes 1, 2, 3, and 4?
That's right.
Okay. And are they posted as such?
Yes. Yeah, there's signage in front of each one.
All right. So when you turned off Highway 26 and you started up in that direction, how long did it take you to get to the first one?
It took me 6 minutes to drive to the first one from that intersection.
Okay. And how were you able to measure the distance on the odometer?
Yes.
Okay. Did you cross-check that against any other resources?
I did not.
Okay. How far was it?
It's a mile.
Okay. And then what about so you said that 1 and 2 are pretty close together?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Was there driving time in between the two, or when you park and get out, are you basically at both?
They're right next door, yeah.
Okay. So to go from the first and the second lanes to the third lane, how far was that?
So, as I said, that's another quarter mile, and it took me another minute to drive that distance.
Okay. And then what about up to the fourth one?
Again, another quarter mile and about a minute to drive that distance.
All right. And now you went this year in 2022?
Yes.
Okay. And obviously we're concerned about events that happened about 4 years ago. I'm going to ask you to go through some photographs that you took while you were up there. And then we're going to see whether we can try to get a sense of what that road condition, how that would have differed in 2018.
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Britton, would you bring up photograph 314?
Objecting to these, Your Honor, for relevance.
I'll allow them.
Okay. What does this depict?
These are potholes on this section of the road between lanes 2 and 3.
Right. And 315?
This is at the intersection of Highway 26 and the dirt road.
Okay, so this one's actually before the one that we just looked at.
That's correct.
All right. And 316?
This is lane number 4.
Okay, so this is at the far end. You're a mile and a half in at this point.
That's right.
Okay, and I think you said that took you about a total of 8 minutes to get up there?
8 minutes, yes.
Okay. And 317?
This is lane number 3.
All right, so this one was a mile and a quarter in?
That's right.
Okay. Your Honor, I do have one exhibit I'd like to show him, but I think maybe we should do that outside the presence of the jury.
Jury, step back out for just one moment. All right, please be seated. And what would the next exhibit be?
Mr. Britton, would you pull up 368 again? Mr. Stringer, from your trip out to the public range, do you recognize this road? Obviously, you weren't in a plane when you went out there. You were in a car. But do you recognize that as the road that you drove?
I do, yes.
Okay, can you show us where the first two lanes are on that road? Well, first of all, orient us to Highway 26.
Sure.
You might want to just use that pointer, yeah, if you don't mind.
The intersection with Highway 26 is not on this image. The road actually goes parallel for some distance, and it's going to be located somewhere around here if that image were extended.
Okay, so that heavy road near the bottom in the lower right corner is 26.
Yeah, this is Highway 26.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
So here the road splits, and this is the road that takes you to the public range. Here are lanes 1 and 2. So this whole section is about a mile. This is lane 3, and this is lane 4, and this is where there's a big parking lot located.
Okay. All right.
All right, and does the state either want to ask questions or make an objection? Are they the same objection as before?
Same as before, Your Honor.
All right. Make your argument, Ms. Weinmiller. I'll tell you what I'm struggling with is, he hasn't seen it from this view, and we know this isn't a photograph from that day. So help me understand why this should be admissible.
Well, we do have the video that would show the same perspective that he had as he was driving up there. This, though, is, as Mr. Perez indicated, this was taken, I think, it sounded like it was maybe 9 months before, fairly recently. At the time, the other evidence, I think, is that the range was brand new. It had just been constructed. It had not been in existence very long. So it, like any other map, I don't think there's ever been a requirement that the map be made on the exact date that the witness is describing, but I think that this does aid significantly. He recognizes that as the route that he followed, even though the perspective is different. And it aids significantly in showing that this is, it's not a highway, it's not a thoroughfare. I think it allows him to more clearly describe sort of what the general road condition is. Even if the road was brand new and it was packed differently and didn't have potholes, I think it gives a good addition to his testimony about why it would take 6 minutes or 8 minutes to get to the end of that road, even though it's only 1.5 miles.
All right, and I'm sorry, the video you were referring to is the video that Mr. Rodriguez had created. Sorry, Mr. Perez had created, right?
Well, he didn't create it. That's the one
Sorry,
that he
no,
found
the
on
one
YouTube.
that he found on YouTube.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
I
the May
understand.
12th of 2018 video. So that one is very close in time to this March 26, 2018, March 26, 27, 2018 time period that Mr. Overstreet was asking about. Google Earth apparently is only taking these images once every 4 years, so this is the one that's closest in time but precedes it.
All right, I'll allow admission of the exhibit and questions about the exhibit, and of course the state can cross-examine with regards to whether or not this witness actually had this kind of a viewpoint, whether or not this witness knows if there's been changes since this was taken. But I'll allow the exhibit.
You.
Yeah. please be seated. Go ahead, Ms. Weinmiller.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Britton, would you pull up Exhibit 368, please? Mr. Stringer, we're looking at a Google Earth aerial shot there. Do you recognize the road that's depicted?
Yes.
Right. And what is the squiggly road that goes kind of through the middle of that photograph?
Yeah, this is the North Fork Wolf Creek Road.
All right. Do you see Highway 26 in the photo?
Yes.
Could you use that pointer, kind of walk us through which roads are which?
Sure.
Let's start with 26.
This is Highway 26. It intersects with North Fork Wolf Creek. Off of this image, it would be around here if that were extended.
Okay, and about how far back would you estimate it goes?
So this stretch is a mile. So, so the shape of it is generally, it goes north briefly and then is parallel to 26 for not very far, a tenth of a mile, 2/10 maybe.
Okay, so almost all of what you drove is shown in that
That's
photo.
correct.
All right. So where are the first and the second lanes that you were talking about?
Yeah, lane number 1 is right here. Lane number 2 is right there.
Okay, and you said it took you about 6 minutes to get up there?
That's right.
Okay, and where's lane 3?
Lane 3 is right here.
All right, so it looks like all the lanes are off to the north of the road,
That's right.
so far at least?
Yeah.
And where's lane 4?
Lane 4 is at the end of the road.
And that is, your measurement was that was 1.5 miles in from that junction with 26?
That's right.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
All right, I'm sorry, cross-examination.
Just briefly, Mr. Stringer, you showed a photograph that you took, correct,
That's right.
of the road, showed some potholes.
Yes.
And when did you take that photograph?
April 26th of this year.
April 26th, okay. And so 4 years ago, in March, do you have any idea what that road looked like?
No,
Are you aware that they had recently put in that road?
I was not.
Were you also not aware then in 2018 that there wasn't a gate at the road?
I was not aware of that.
Do you know when they put in that sign out at the road?
No.
And the photographs you took of what you referred to as the shooting lanes 1, 2, 3, and 4, correct? Do you have any idea that that's what they looked like in 2018?
I do not.
Were you aware that they didn't bring in those barriers until some time later?
I was not.
You don't really have any reference. You just took the photographs and timed that drive.
That's correct.
Okay. Because of the condition of the road, what was your speed that you were driving?
Yeah, I drove 15 miles per hour, slowing down to 5 at various potholes.
Because of the potholes?
That's right.
So if that road was new and packed more neatly without the potholes, you could have driven much faster?
So the potholes are located pretty centrally in various spots. The road itself is in pretty good condition. So there are 3 or 4 pretty bad spots that I slowed down and went around. And otherwise the road is pretty good for, being a dirt and gravel road.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, can you go ahead and step down?
Thank you.
And she's on WebEx, right? Can you get her on there for me? Your Honor, the defense calls Karen Lawless, but I think we need to get her up on WebEx.
Okay, do we think that's going to take any time or not? I'm asking because I would prefer to take the afternoon break a little later, but if we think this is going to take some time, we'll take it now.
If we could, Your Honor, because we also have a matter for the court, I don't want to keep sending the jury out.
All right, let's take the afternoon break then. Let's plan on the jury being back at 3:25, hopefully. But we'll be on our afternoon break and we'll take up a matter with the court, so we'll leave the record running.
Okay, we'll go on. Oh, we'll decent right now, sorry.
why don't we take up the matter first before we break?
Your Honor, what I believe defense is doing is calling Karen Lawless as a DNA expert. And she is not. She owns a company that essentially farms out DNA to labs. She was a lab tech in the 90s. She had stopped at the crime lab in 2000, I believe. She has not worked in a crime lab since then. She doesn't have any certification to work in a crime lab or conduct DNA testing. She hasn't had that proficiency in over 15 years. And she simply just doesn't have the qualifications to testify about DNA.
Defense?
Your Honor, I think she does have the qualifications to testify about DNA. She's not going to testify that she tested for DNA, but certainly she's done that in the past. She's going to testify about, and I'll allow her to lay her own qualifications on the record, and we can do that. I have her, but I have not printed out. Is her CV in evidence?
Well, it's not in evidence, but we have
But
it
we
as
have
an
it.
exhibit. It is.
We have her CV in any event. She's testified as an expert in Oregon courts numerous times, including in this county.
But in DNA, I'm well familiar with her.
Yeah.
She testified on DNA.
And she's going to testify not about testing DNA, but about whether DNA samples could have been, whether the casings could have been swabbed, and whether those swabs could have been tested for DNA in 2018. Whether what the science said, the available science said about finding meaningful DNA. Well, the court actually heard her testify at the
I did,
motions hearing.
what I don't remember is, because I don't remember knowing she wasn't certified for 15 years and didn't actually.
Your Honor,
No, I'm just asking the question, what is going to be the basis of her knowledge for how it can be tested? I'm just asking how she knows that.
well, she would know about the familiarity. There are several studies that talk about, because this is a time in 2018 when this is a technology that's coming to the fore. The Oregon State Crime Lab had just begun, I think, in 2017 to do the touch DNA analysis. I think she would testify that she knew that the Oregon State Crime Lab was doing DNA analysis on swabs of casings at the time, and consistent, I believe, with Miss, and I keep forgetting her last name, is Saramano Winters' testimony and her statements in this case, that they were getting about, I think, a 6% interpretable DNA as early as 2018. And that there were studies, studies that were being published in journals that any competent expert would have been reviewing at the time about how to find DNA on casings and how to improve the percentage of times that you do find meaningful DNA. She's just going to talk about the fact that it was an available technology that was scientifically known at a relevant time period.
All right, I am familiar with this witness, and I know that she does testify regularly on a variety of topics related to the crime lab. I'm going to allow her to testify, Mr. Overstreet, but again, you can cross-examine, and if she gets to a point where you believe that she is straying from what she actually knows through her business and practice, then you can re-raise the objection, but I'm going to allow her to testify. So let's take a break. We now are down to, let's be back and ready to go at 3:25.
Good afternoon. This is the court clerk. Ms. Lawless, I see you're logged on. Can I have you go ahead and turn on your video and unmute yourself, please? Ms. Lawless, this is the court clerk. Could you please unmute yourself and turn on your video, please? Ms. Lawless, this is the court clerk. Are you able to please unmute yourself and turn on your video?
This might have done it. Okay.
Miss Lawless, this is the
Okay.
court clerk. I can hear you. Can you please turn on your video? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll be getting started in just another minute. I'll have you just sit tight, Miss Lawless.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you.
Yep, I'll have you sit tight for the time being. All rise.
All right, please be seated. And I can't remember, Ms. Weinmiller, you may have said it, but can you indicate who the defense next witness is?
She's actually Ms. Maxfield's.
All right, Ms. Max.
Linda Lawless, Your Honor.
All right, and,
I'm sorry, Karen Lawless. I just gave her a whole new name.
okay. Ms. Lawless, can you raise your right hand and my clerk will give you an oath?
Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. You may put your hand down, and then because we're being recorded, I'll ask you to please state and spell your first and last name.
My name is Karen Lawless. My first name is spelled Karen. My last name is spelled Lawless.
All right, Ms. Maxfield, when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Lawless. What do you do professionally?
Good. I have a company called Forensic Edge, and it is I focus on consulting with criminal cases, usually where DNA is involved.
And you were retained by the defense in this case to consult with us regarding DNA?
That is correct.
Okay. And you weren't the first DNA expert for the defense to consult with, is that right?
No, I was not.
Did you take over from another expert by the name of Gentry Roth?
Yes, I did.
And did Mr. Roth die while Ms. Brophy's case was pending?
Yes, Mr. Roth passed away.
Okay. And did you take over several of Mr. Roth's cases after he passed?
No, this was pretty much the only one I ended up taking over.
Okay. Assume that shortly after Ms. Brophy was arrested in 2018, that the defense sought to test the crime scene casings for DNA. Based on the state of the relevant science, was that a reasonable request, in your opinion?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I want to talk to you just generally about your qualifications. Can you describe for the jury generally your qualifications with respect to DNA?
Sure. First, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from Southern Oregon University. After that, I took additional coursework at Portland State University in the area of genetics, biochemistry, and forensic DNA. And that was so that I could work in the DNA unit at the Oregon State Police Forensic Lab, which is where I was working after I had graduated from college. Within the Oregon State Police Lab, I worked in several areas, but my primary focus was in the DNA unit and in the area of serology, which is body fluids.
So, have you had other continuing education?
Yes, every year I try to attend conferences, workshops, anything that has to do with DNA and that focus.
What professional organizations are you affiliated with?
I'm currently affiliated with the Northwest Association of Forensic Scientists, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and the Association of, I believe it's DNA Analysts and Administrators.
Okay. Do you provide training to others?
I do. Currently, that is mostly with attorneys and investigators that I'm working with.
Okay. We've heard the phrase a certified lab technician or a certified lab person. I want to talk to you briefly about accreditation. Can you tell us what accreditation is?
Sure. Accreditation is it's a certificate from a third party. So for instance, Oregon State Police Lab is an accredited laboratory, but that is for the laboratory. It's not for an individual person.
Okay, so are laboratories certified?
Laboratories have an accreditation if they are an accredited laboratory. And it means that they have quality assurance programs in place, they have protocols in place, and somebody's come in and audited and has verified that they can follow those procedures and get to the correct results, demonstrate that they're able to use the protocols that they have.
Okay, so a certified laboratory person is someone who follows these protocols that are set up with respect to accreditation?
You might be referring to proficiency tested. So under under accreditation, an analyst working at an accredited laboratory needs to take proficiency tests to show that they can use those protocols that are in place for that laboratory.
Okay, so is that what makes that person certified?
The proficiency test is not actually certifying the individual. The proficiency test is showing that they are following their protocols. They can get to an expected answer for that proficiency test. And then the accreditation is granted to the laboratory.
Okay, but if an expert does not work within a laboratory, would they be certified, or would they fit within this umbrella of accreditation proficiency?
No, they don't, because the accreditation is for the laboratory, not for an individual.
Okay. Your experience based as a defense expert in DNA, have you visited the Oregon State Crime Laboratory to observe DNA analysis?
Yes, I have.
And how many times have you done that?
I don't know the exact number, but at least 4 times.
Okay. And has the Oregon State Police Crime Lab ever challenged your presence there as an expert observer?
No, they have not.
So do you often perform the role of giving the defense team your expert input about whether the crime lab has performed various tasks consistent with the available science, protocols, and procedures?
Yes.
I want to turn now to I want to talk to you generally about obtaining DNA, meaningful DNA from spent cartridge casings. Has the science changed much with respect to obtaining meaningful DNA from spent cartridge casings?
When are you referring to when it's starting from? So
How long? Well, let me ask you this. How long have labs been trying to get meaningful DNA off of crime scene casings or spent casings?
probably since about the late 2000s. You know, there could have been laboratories that were trying to do it much sooner than that, but I think most started, late, maybe 2007 to 2011 or so. Since that time, it has improved.
Okay. Can you describe generally the advances in DNA science, say since 2007 and leading into 2018? Where were we in 2018 in terms of advancements?
By 2018, extraction methods, the first step of DNA analysis, had improved. The second step, quantitation, was better able to assess how much DNA was actually present in a sample. The third step, the kits that were used, looked at more additional markers than what had previously been used. And then finally, the detection step was solid, and interpreting mixtures after the results were obtained using probabilistic genotyping software had advanced, in mixtures, if those were detected, were much easier to interpret.
Okay. And so are we talking, these advancements, are we talking about what is known as touch DNA?
Yes, those refer to all aspects of DNA, but importantly, with touch DNA are low-level samples, and fired cartridge casings, unfired cartridge casings, those are all would be considered low-level samples.
Are you familiar with a study that was published by the Forensic International Genetics Journal titled "An Optimized Procedure for Obtaining DNA from Fired and Unfired Ammunition"?
Yes.
When was that study published?
It It was published in 2015.
And is the Forensic International Genetics Journal one you would expect that people in your field of expertise would be reading regularly?
Yes, it is an art. I'm sorry. It is a resource for different for DNA.
Okay, can you just summarize, who are the authors of this study?
Can I refer to the article, please?
Pardon me?
I'm going to refer to the article. Is that okay?
Sure.
The authors are Sean Montpetit and Patrick O'Donnell.
And where were they employed, do you know?
According to the article, they were with San Diego Police Department.
And why did Montpetit, I guess if I've said that name correctly, do this study, do you know?
He did this study because there were a lot more cases where they were asking for DNA on cartridge casings. And prior to this, they hadn't had great results getting DNA off of cartridge casings. So he was trying to attempt to change their methods so that he could obtain better results.
In this, before we get into what the study found, did this published article acknowledge people or other experts who had provided input, suggestions on the manuscript or the study?
It did have an acknowledgement section, yes.
And were there names there that seemed familiar to you?
Yes, there were.
For example, the name Marla Kaplan, was that one of the people who acknowledged or had provided suggestions of this manuscript before it was published?
Yes, Marla Kaplan was thanked for their review and suggestions on the manuscript prior to publication.
And who is Marla Kaplan?
Marla Kaplan is the technical leader, the DNA technical leader at the OSP Forensic Lab.
And how long has she been in that role?
I don't recall the exact date, but probably since about 2008 or 2009.
From that acknowledgement, can we infer that the scientists who do DNA work for the Oregon State Police Crime Lab were familiar with this article in 2018?
Yes, I believe that they would have been.
So can you just describe briefly what this article, what the authors did, what they were studying, and what the results of the study was?
They took about 800 rounds of ammunition or cartridges, and they kept splitting them in halves. And the goal was to try to get an optimized procedure. In the end, they had some samples or some rounds of ammunition that they carried around with them. They had some that they loaded directly from the box. They loaded some, fired some, unloaded others, and analyzed all the results. And they used two different primary methods for extracting the DNA from the cartridges. One method was what we would call a swabbing method, and the other was to soak the samples prior to the analysis. And that was the method that they determined worked better for them and that they identified as being optimized.
What was the result of that study? Was the San Diego Police Lab able to get some relatively good results or to improve the results of obtaining meaningful DNA?
Yes, according to the article, they improved about 27% overall.
Now, since that time, since 2015, has this been an issue that's been discussed repeatedly or not repeatedly, but frequently at the conferences you've attended?
I haven't heard it every single year. The last 2 years, I have heard it as a topic.
I want to talk to you generally about the importance of staging forensic testing, if that's all right.
Sure.
I'm sorry that if I'm looking in the wrong direction, but my camera has disappeared, so I have to keep showing you the back of my head so that I can look at you, if that's okay. Can you, there are, as I understand it, different forensic tests might make, one forensic test might make another forensic test difficult or impossible. Is that right?
That is correct.
So for example, it could be that DNA or meaningful DNA couldn't be found if someone did a different kind of test first. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When you worked at the Oregon State Crime Lab, how did they approach that problem?
In any case that was coming in was generally looked at first as a kind of a triage. You would look at it and look at what evidence there actually was, make a determination on which evidence might give results and which evidence you might hold off on. So there were rounds of DNA or testing in different forensic areas conducted, and it would be staged as far as you would use the evidence that would more likely give a result and be the most probative. Then you kind of work your way through the evidence.
So, for example, if DNA is maybe the most vulnerable or the most sensitive to being degraded or destroyed as an item's handled, would you begin with DNA and maybe end with the tool mark testing or someone looking at a bullet casing under a microscope?
Absolutely. If a casing was going to go to firearms, then it would be better to swab the casing before it went to firearms so that it wouldn't get contaminated or destroyed in the process.
So, would it always be best to have a forensic expert talk about how a piece of evidence is going to move through the process to make sure that useful evidence isn't destroyed or squandered?
It's good to involve an expert, a forensic expert who has knowledge in that, yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with an Oregon State crime lab employee by the name of Stephanie Winter? And I know she has one more name that I've left off. I'm sorry.
Yes, I am familiar with Stephanie Winter-Cermeno.
Okay. And what does she do?
Her job title is a DNA supervisor.
With the Oregon State Crime Lab?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know whether Ms. Cermeno Winter has provided information to the prosecutor in this case and then to us about swabbing DNA casings between 2017 and I think 2020?
Yes, she did.
And from that exchange, do you know whether the Oregon State Crime Lab was actually testing DNA or testing casings to determine whether they could find meaningful DNA?
According to the information I received, yes, they were testing cartridge casings during that time frame.
Okay. And do you know whether they were able to obtain meaningful results during that time frame?
Yes, they were able to obtain meaningful results on a small percentage of the samples.
And was that about 6%?
Yes, that's the number that she gave.
Okay. But this San Diego Police Department, they were actually doing better than 6% with their testing method?
They were doing better than 6%. As I said, they quoted it about 27% overall, but that was a combination of a couple different amplification kits. So I don't think that the overall number for all amplification kits was the same, but they did improve their results overall, yes.
Okay. And I think, at least as I understood this, that different labs use different types of chemicals, different types of software, different tools in analyzing DNA. Is that right?
That's correct. Generally, every laboratory they do have different equipment, different kits that they use, different chemistries for extraction. And it's best for each laboratory to find a method that works best for them and use it.
Okay. So,
But what is good for
go ahead, I'm sorry.
what is good for one laboratory isn't always best for another laboratory. So that's why each laboratory goes through the process of working with it in their own laboratory to ensure that it works.
So if the San Diego police had success in their laboratory using their tools, it might not translate to another laboratory that used different tools. Is that right?
That's correct. It wouldn't necessarily translate in the same way.
Okay. From this study, were you able to determine what the San Diego Police Department lab was using at the various stages of the process?
I did. The article did talk about the different procedures that were being done, the different methods at each step of the process. And what I did notice is that they were very similar to the abilities and the methods that Oregon State Police uses.
In other words, would it have been easier for the Oregon State Police Crime Lab to employ the same methods and tools that have been employed by the San Diego Police Department to achieve these better results?
It's possible they were actually using very similar protocols in that time frame.
Okay. I know you're a DNA expert, but do you know anything about a process where a crime scene casing is basically fumigated with super glue to determine whether it has prints on it, fingerprints?
I know that the process is there. I'm not a fingerprint or a latent analyst.
Okay. Assume that the analyst in this case said that in 30 years, she had not been able to obtain an identifiable fingerprint using this method. And also, well, let me ask you this. If over 30 years, useful results had not come from a particular form of forensic testing, what might you conclude as an expert?
That's not a process that should be done on that type of evidence.
Okay. And we talked about staging evidence so that you had the highest chance of finding useful forensic evidence to share with the jury. How might a lab have avoided fumigating or supergluing casings that could contain DNA before the DNA was actually swabbed, the DNA samples were actually swabbed? What could have prevented that?
If you collect the DNA
In other words, if
and then preserve, collect the DNA off the casing, any that might be there, and then preserve that.
But if the casings got fumigated with super glue before anyone mentioned that maybe DNA could be found on the casing, would that destroy the DNA evidence?
It could.
Do you know have you ever seen one of these fumigated or super glued casings in your work at the crime lab?
No, I've seen super glued weapons and other items, but I don't recall seeing a super glued casing.
Does it have a distinctive appearance?
The weapons did when I saw those.
So you were able to, by observation, to see that process had been employed?
Usually, yes.
Would it surprise you if the technician from the Oregon State Crime Lab who examined these casings under a microscope was not able to see the super glue or this fumigation residue?
I would be surprised, but I don't know how the super glue reacts with the surface on the casing.
Okay. Based on your expertise and experience in this area, in 2018, do you think it would have been reasonable to believe that there was maybe a 6% chance of finding meaningful DNA on the spent cartridge casings?
Yes, I think it's reasonable to believe that there may have been DNA on them, and if it had been, if the DNA had been collected and preserved, then there might be something that would have been detectable.
Okay. And do you know whether in Oregon recently that actually a murder was solved with finding DNA on a single crime scene casing?
Yes, that has happened on a couple different cases.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Lawless, I'm right here, but I'm kind of looking to the left so I can see you.
Okay.
I want to touch on that last. Ms. Maxfield asked you if you're aware of a case recently that had been solved because of DNA. When was that?
I know of a couple cases in 2021 that were solved, and I know of one back to about 2019.
Okay, not in June of 2018.
I don't know of anyone in June of 2018.
Okay, were you aware of the protocol of the Portland Police Department regarding collection of shell casings in 2018?
I have not reviewed any protocols from Portland Police.
So you wouldn't know what was expected of the detectives and the police on scene regarding the collection and preservation of shell casings in 2018?
I do not know what their protocols say.
Okay, so you're here today to testify only about what the Oregon State Crime Lab and their procedures.
About what can be done with evidence. If you have a casing, you have the opportunity to do DNA on a casing.
In your opinion, would you expect that the police would follow their own protocols?
As with any protocol, I think that you have to actually look at what evidence you have. There's always exceptions to a rule, and there's a protocol in place to go to when you need to make an exception to a rule. And before you just jump straight into something, if you know it's not going to work, then it is wise to consult with other experts to see what is possible, what should we do with this piece of evidence.
Okay, so let me ask you a different way. If the Portland police are directed and educated and trained specifically not to collect DNA off of shell casings, would you expect them to follow that?
If they're directed to not collect it, then yes, I would assume that they would not collect it.
Would it seem reasonable then that they might use a different forensic procedure, like attempting to collect Latin fingerprints?
I would say that it would be okay to collect another or use a different method. However, if the method was not, did not ever give results, then that doesn't seem to be a wise choice.
How do you know there was never any results?
Because of what was just discussed and other previous conversations.
Okay, and what was just discussed was Ms. Maxfield told you that Tina Willard said that she herself had never been successful in collecting latent fingerprints off of shell casings. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Now, what if she finished that thought and she said, but I am aware of others who have collected latent fingerprints off of shell casings? Would that change your opinion?
I haven't been provided that information.
What if I just told you that?
Then yes, I would look at how often did they get fingerprints? What is the what would be the best procedure to go by? Would it be latents or would it be DNA?
Okay.
Latents for many years have been known not to provide very good results off of casings.
Right. And you cited that the OSP Crime Lab shared some information with you during the course of this case where they had tested 120 shell casings with a 6% success rate. Were you aware of the Crime Lab protocol at the time where they would only test shell casings from crime scenes if there was no suspect information?
That's part of their protocol. There were several steps in that process.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if that phrase is complete, but if there is, they did have a protocol in place for touch DNA samples, and usually it was exhausting all other forensic avenues before they would test it.
Exactly. Thank you. You talked about a study in San Diego. You said that resulted in 27% of samples having DNA. But I just want to be real clear about what that study really was. It was 800 shell casings, right?
Correct.
And 400 people carried around in their pocket unrestricted for 2 whole days, right?
They carried them around. I don't know if it was in the pocket or just carried around in general. There were not any specific protocols that were given for those individuals.
Right. No restrictions put on. They could handle them at will.
There were no restrictions or no specific protocols on that.
And the remaining 400 rounds were taken straight from the box of ammunition and into a magazine to be fired, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then when they did their DNA testing, they just mixed up all 800, right?
Actually, no, they didn't. They took 200 of the ones that had been loaded, that had been carried. They took 200 of the ones that had been carried and fired. They took another batch that they separated as loaded, and the cartridges that were loaded and handled and carried. And then there was another 200 that were directly from the box. I'm sorry, I may have mixed that up at the last there. They split each into groups of 200, that being some that were carried, others that were fired, and then the ones that were loaded directly from the box that were just carried, and also then the ones that were fired.
Then they subjected half of them to soaking and half of them to swabbing, correct? Of the 800?
That's correct. So out of each set of 200, they broke that down into 100 each. 100 each of each section was actually analyzed separately.
So how do you know of the 27% came from what?
There are some tables in the article. The 27% statistic was just their overall statistic that they had given.
Right. I don't think you use this term, but a shell casing is actually, a spent shell casing is actually considered a degraded sample, right?
Often the DNA on it would be considered degraded. That's correct.
Okay. Is there a reason that term degraded is used?
Oftentimes, it's believed that the heat if it is fired through a weapon, then the heat can actually degrade or break down the DNA.
Okay. Now, Ms. Maxfield referred to you as a DNA expert. What crime lab do you work in?
I do not work in a crime lab.
You own a company called Forensic Edge, right?
Correct.
And what you do is you review DNA cases, sometimes in this case for defense, and then you actually consult and sort of farm out those cases to the crime lab. Is that right?
No, that's not correct. I review cases. I'm often retained by attorneys, and these can be private cases or indigent cases. So I'm retained. I help them go through the case, reviewing it for whatever it is that they're looking for, or to see if the case has been worked properly. Is there any evidence that needs to be tested that they would like to have tested, or if everything was done correctly, and if there is testing that needs to be done, I help them locate usually it's a private accredited laboratory that can perform the DNA analysis.
When's the last time you actually worked in a crime lab yourself?
In 2000.
So you haven't worked in a accredited crime lab in over 20 years.
Correct. That's not what I do now. I do the consulting side of it, but I do not work in the laboratory doing the analysis.
And how much were you paid in this case?
I received $175 an hour,
And how many hours?
and probably about 40.
$175 an hour for 40 hours?
Yes.
Is there anything else in addition to that for you to actually testify?
I'm sorry.
Do you receive any other compensation for actually testifying, or is that what included in that number?
I've requested additional hours for the testimony, but it's the same hourly rate.
Okay, and so how many? Okay, so just on top of the 40 hours would be however long you're here today.
Probably there might be a few more hours. I haven't done a final tally on it. I'm just estimating.
Okay, fair enough. And I'm sorry, you testified about the swabbing methods, the soaking methods, stuff like that. Which one was the one that the Oregon State Crime Lab was using in 2018?
I have not known them to do the soaking method, but it's possible that they did. I know that they often swab items. So cases that I've seen that I have reviewed that they did were usually swabs of casings.
Okay, and just to be clear, that study you've referenced a few times from San Diego, they determined that soaking was a better method, not swabbing.
Soaking is what worked better for San Diego. Yes, that's correct.
So you haven't worked in a crime lab in over 20 years. You haven't. You talked about proficiency, but you yourself haven't even been tested for proficiency in over 15 years, right?
I know the proficiency tests are for when you're working in the accredited laboratory, and that's why when there is evidence that needs to be tested, I have it sent to a laboratory that is accredited.
You would agree that at some point you have to make a decision essentially to test for DNA or fingerprints. You can't really do both, right?
I would agree with that, yes.
Okay. Would you also agree with the statement that if you were wearing, if the user, was wearing nitrile or latex gloves when they were handling the ammunition, that you wouldn't expect to get a DNA result?
Say that again?
If the person who is loading the ammunition into a firearm or into a magazine, if that person is wearing a latex or nitrile glove, assuming they put it on correctly, and they took the ammunition out of the box and into the magazine, that you would not expect to obtain a DNA profile off of that sample.
No, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. The nitrile gloves, or any glove, can actually have DNA on the outside of it. So it depends on how the glove has actually been handled. And if the glove is handled, you can transfer DNA to that. And when the glove is then put on and comes in contact with something, it's called secondary transfer, but you can actually transfer to other items. So it's difficult to know exactly what's on something, but just wearing a glove does not prevent the transfer of DNA.
Sure. Let's say you handle the glove appropriately. So not touching the fingers of the glove. You put your hand into it. You never touch the fingers of the glove. The fingers of the glove is the only piece that touches the shell shell casings, and those are loaded into a magazine. Would you expect to get a DNA profile off of those shell casings?
It would be less likely to get a profile if they've worn gloves and there's been no contact with the glove, assuming that there hasn't been some other sort of indirect DNA deposit.
Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Can you redirect?
Yes. Ms. Lawless, back when you worked for the Oregon State Crime Lab, and even now, did the Oregon State Crime Lab provide DNA analysis, ballistics analysis, and all the various kinds of forensic testing for the various police agencies throughout the state?
Yes, they did.
And, for example, does the Portland Police do its own DNA analysis?
No, they do not.
And they don't do their own ballistics?
No, they don't do any firearms comparisons.
Okay. So is what typically happens is that the police agency will collect the evidence and then send it on to the state crime lab for testing?
Yes, that is correct.
And does the Oregon State Crime Lab provide training and guidelines to each police agency to tell them the best way to collect evidence and to preserve it for later testing?
Yes, they do actually do that. When I was employed there, one of my roles was to actually go out and give training to law enforcement agencies. So I traveled around the state of Oregon giving training on how to identify evidence at a scene, how to document it, how to collect it and preserve it so that it could be used for later.
So is it your understanding that the protocols that talk about the correct collection and preservation of evidence is to make sure that we actually have evidence by the time we get to trial?
Yes.
And would it make any sense to you whatsoever that a police agency would have a set of protocols or directives that didn't stay current with the science?
Well, I would expect that with every single case, each case really should be looked at independently. And when you have something that's an unusual situation or you're not sure what to do, that you actually contact the individuals who are going to work evidence later to make a determination on what is best to do.
Well, I guess my question to you is, does it make sense that the Portland Police Bureau would have a directive that told officers not to swab casings for DNA? How much does it cost to swab a casing for DNA? Just to swab it, just to preserve it?
Swabs are not very expensive, even if you get the most expensive swabs that are out there. I would say that it's under $5.
Okay. So we could have preserved the DNA evidence for about $5. Does it make any sense whatsoever that a police department would have a directive or a protocol that told officers not to do this $5 test? In fact, told them not to, but instead told them to do a test that at least one technician was not able to get meaningful results from for over 30 years?
It doesn't make sense to me.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, you can disconnect, Ms. Lawless.
Thank you.
Defense next witness.
Defense will call Art Hively. Oh, sorry.
All right, sir, if you want to come up here and go ahead and step into the witness box, but don't have a seat yet. Just position yourself as close to the microphone as possible, and my clerk will give you an oath.
I'll ask you to please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, then you may be seated and you may remove your mask. And then because we're being recorded, I'll ask you to please state and spell your first and last name.
Certainly. My name is Arthur Hively, Arthur. Last name is Hively.
All right, and Mr. Hively, there is water. If that's an old one, yeah, feel free to. All right. Go ahead when you're ready, defense.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Hively.
Good afternoon.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a digital forensic examiner.
And tell us about how you got to be a digital forensic examiner. What's your education? What's your background?
Certainly. In 2005, I was a sergeant with the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office, and I was assigned to a high-tech crimes task force in San Jose. During that year, I went to my first 5 courses in digital forensics. I actually ended up retiring at the end of that year, and by spring of 2006, I was working for a small police agency in the Central Valley near Modesto, California. Because of my training and experience with the Sheriff's Office, they asked that I become their representative at the Sacramento Valley High-Tech Crimes Task Force, as we were a satellite office for them. So between spring of 2006 and when I retired from there, August 2018, as a collateral duty assignment, I was a high-tech crimes investigator. And between 2005 and 2018, I had in excess of 1,000 hours of high-tech crime investigation training with a focus on digital forensics. I have examined thousands of different types of media in my investigations. I have testified as an expert in digital forensics in county courts in California, as well as federal courts in Sacramento and Fresno, as well as military courts in Europe and the United States.
Okay. When did you retire from law enforcement?
August 31st, 2018.
Right. What have you been doing since that time?
September 1st, 2018, I was hired by Josiah Roloff as an examiner for his organization, with the exception of 8 months where I was working for an e-discovery firm. I've been working for him since then.
All right. And you know, Mr. Roloff testified previously in this case.
Yes.
Okay. Is he currently occupied with a case in Virginia?
Yes.
And did he ask you to step in and finish up just the last steps, the last
did.
projects? Right. Did you, in that capacity, look within the past week at activity that Ms. Brophy engaged in on the morning of June 2nd, 2018?
Yes.
Did you identify activity on her digital devices that morning that related to writings that she was conducting herself or performing herself as an author?
Yes.
Right. I'd like you to look at, Mr. Britton, can you bring up 373, Exhibit 373? Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Yes, this is information from can I see the whole screen there? This is information from the Microsoft Windows operating system that logged an event that occurred at 9:02 in the morning on June 2nd, 2018, that shows the connection of a USB Lexar thumb drive to the computer.
Okay, and which computer was it being attached to?
It's an HP computer. I had a forensic image provided to me.
Right. And that 9:02 time, is that Pacific time?
Yes, that's the local time.
Right. What activity did you find on that computer or that Lexar thumb drive following that 9:02 event, that attachment of the flash drive to the laptop?
Well, there were a number of events, not only related to the Lexar, but also to the computer itself, in which a number of documents were either opened, modified, or moved to the Lexar thumb drive.
All right, and that process with respect to these documents, the authorship documents, that began at 9:02?
Yes.
And how long did that continue?
I showed the last activity occurring around 9:20 in the morning with a document that was labeled nancybrophy.docx.
Okay, and did you review the content of that document?
No.
So tell us about the activity with respect to the authorship, the stories that you found on that Lexar thumb drive, and what that process was in between 9:02 and 9:20. What kind of activity did you observe her conducting? Well, and then, of course, I'm only presuming it was her, but on that laptop.
Certainly. As I mentioned, a number of documents were opened. Phaedra story.do6 was opened, docx was opened, and then also copied to the Lexar thumb drive. There were another document that starts off with the word savvy, S-A-V-V-Y, with, I'm not sure the whole title, that was also copied over, and a couple other documents that had the titles of witches in them.
Okay. And you indicated that some of that activity was occurring on that Lexar flash drive that was attached to the laptop, and some of it was occurring on the computer itself, the laptop itself?
Correct.
Right. Did you also find that morning some documentation or some evidence of activity related to the insurance business?
I did.
And then what was the earliest time that you found that activity?
At 8:48 in the morning.
Okay. And this also is on June 2nd of 2018?
Exactly.
How long did that activity occur? Continue?
Well, an email was sent approximately 8:48 related to in the insurance business. And then shortly thereafter,
Well, let me stop you now because I think we've got that email. Can you pull up 370, Mr. Breton? And the 370 is also a document you created?
yes, I prepared this for this testimony today.
You want to see the whole thing?
No, this is fine.
All right, so what does this show us?
Yes, this is the header of the email that was sent from Nancy Brophy at gmail.com on June 2nd, 2018 at 8:48 in the morning to helpnet.com. It was a response to the email that had come in the night before.
Okay, and do we have the content of this email?
Yes, it's just a single line.
What does it indicate?
Please note I have renewed my license and taken my AML from Limra. I will email as instructed.
Did you then find something that, another entry, Mr. Breton, would you pull up 371? Did you find activity that seemed to be responsive to that email?
Yes, this particular exhibit shows entries in the Windows event logs from the computer showing that at 8:48 in the morning, the Chrome browser was opened and a search on the Yahoo search engine was made for the letters NIPR, and then subsequent to that, that actual website was accessed.
And once that website was accessed, were you able to tell what activity was conducted on it?
Yes, on that website, you have the option to download what's called the License Manager Summary, and that occurred on the computer at 8:49 in the morning.
So there was a download of something at that time?
At that time, it was an HTML, yes, it was downloaded onto the desktop, and then shortly thereafter, there was a PDF that was also downloaded at 8:50 in the morning, the title of which was report.pdf.
And could you tell what was done then with that report, the PDF that was downloaded?
Yes, initially it was downloaded to the downloads folder for the user Nancy, and then it was actually copied over to the desktop in a folder called insurance.
Was something done with that document following that activity that you've just described?
Yes, shortly thereafter, an email was sent again to helpnet.com, and it was an attachment to that email.
Great. Mr. Breton, would you pull up 372?
This is the email I was referring to on June 2nd, 2018 at 8:52 in the morning. This was sent again from Nancy Brophy at gmail.com to helpnet.com. And if you scroll a little further down, you'll see that there's an attachment report.pdf.
Okay, and that report.pdf is the same document, or at least has the same file name as the document that you saw downloaded from the NIPR site?
Yes,
Right. And this would be the second email that went to healthnet.com that morning?
yes. The first one was at 8:48 in the morning.
Okay, and this one follows about 4 minutes later?
Yes.
Did you find other activity on the computer that morning that was related to the insurance business, or seemed like it might have been related to insurance business?
Well, I looked at the report.pdf. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking. That was in fact a license, a copy of a license for Nancy Brophy. Is that what you're referring to?
And Mr. Britton, can you go back to 371? I think that's the second page, maybe not. Is this the document that you remember being that report.pdf?
Yes, this document exists both in two locations, as I mentioned, in the downloads folder as well as in the insurance folder on the desktop. And this appears to be the one that was sent at 8:52 in the morning as an attachment.
All right. And then after that happens at 8:52, was there other activity before that flash drive was plugged in at 9:02? Do you recall whether?
Well, there was a lot of activity. But I'm not sure what you're asking specifically.
Was there anything related to either the insurance business or the authorship between 8:52 and 9:02, or was there a jump from this to that?
No, I
In
think
terms of user-generated activity?
just that, as I mentioned, that documents were opened and moved and they were accessed and modified.
After the flash drive was put in at 9:02 or before?
Yes, after it was connected at 9:02 in the morning.
Okay, right, and you've already testified about that.
Yes,
Okay, so you said that that activity related to her writing and the flash drive, these Phaedra's story and the witches were documents that were being worked on or moved between the flash drive and the laptop from 9:02 to 9:20. After 9:20, did you find evidence on the computer of additional activity that was user-generated? And I'm talking about like in the immediate, between, let's say, 9:20 and 10 o'clock.
not on the computer, no.
Okay. Did you find activity on her telephone in that time frame?
Well, I had received call detail records that were provided to me for examination, and there were a number of calls that started around 9:13 in the morning.
Okay, and so those call detail records, those are actually coming from the phone company, from AT&T?
The carrier was AT&T, yes.
Okay. And there were a number of phone calls back and forth that morning?
Yes, there were numerous calls.
Okay. Do you have that call log with you?
I do.
I want to try to go through this in a way that does not publicize the phone numbers. So let's be careful not to use full phone numbers. At 10:03 in the morning, did you see an outgoing call from the number that you knew to be Ms. Brophy's phone number?
At 10:03 in the morning, yes.
Wait a minute. I think I jumped ahead by accident. Let's start just a little bit earlier. I was on the wrong page. This is the first phone call that you saw coming in at 9:13.
Correct.
Okay. And did you have any information about who that call was made by?
No, the phone number was not available. Excuse me, the phone contact information was not available with that particular phone number.
Okay. And is the area code for that one 458?
It is.
All right. And was that a call that was coming into Ms. Brophy?
It was an incoming call to the phone, and it lasted 12 seconds.
All right. And when was the next call?
There was an incoming call at 9:54 in the morning.
Right. Incoming to Ms. Brophy's phone number.
Correct.
And leave off the last 4 digits of that number, but would you tell us what the area code was and what the prefix was?
Certainly, it was 503-516, and that call lasted for 1 minute and 16 seconds.
I'm going to represent to you that that number is associated with a witness who's testified previously named Maxine Borcherding. And give us again the length of that call.
Yes, it was 1 minute and 16 seconds.
And that happened at 9:54 in the morning.
It did.
What was the next call?
A phone call was made from Ms. Brophy's phone to Dan Brophy's phone.
Okay, and did that appear to be almost immediately after the call ended with Ms. Borcherding?
Yes,
And was that registered as 9:56 a.m.?
yes.
And how long was that call?
It shows 5 seconds.
What was the time of the next call?
10:03 in the morning.
And who were the parties to that call?
Again, this was an outgoing call from Ms. Brophy's phone to Dan Brophy's phone.
So there had been a call at 9:56 a.m. from Ms. Brophy's phone to Dan Brophy's phone, and then there's another call at 10:03, again from her phone to Mr. Brophy's phone.
Yes,
Right. And did it appear that that connected?
0 seconds long.
At 10:04, was there also a call?
Yes, there was an outgoing call from Ms. Brophy's phone.
And who did she place that call to?
It was the area code 506 with a prefix of 516 that we discussed earlier.
I mean, 503.
Thank you, 503.
Okay, same number that we talked about earlier that I'd identified as Maxine Borcherding.
Yes.
And how long was that call?
That call was 2 minutes and 43 seconds long.
That's at 10:04, so that's the minute that, now these records aren't specific as to the seconds, right? It's just giving you the hour and the minute.
Correct.
Okay. So according to the records, that's within a minute or a minute after the second call that she makes to Dan Brophy?
Sorry, say that again?
According to the records, that's a minute after, they register it as 10:04, a minute after the 10:03 call that she had made, the second call to Dan Brophy?
Yes.
And how long was this call to Ms. Borcherding?
1 minute and 16 seconds again.
Now, I'm looking at the one at 10:04.
Oh, apologize. 2 minutes and 43 seconds.
All right, so she's again on the phone to Ms. Borcherding. This time it's just under 3 minutes, correct?
Yes.
And then at 10:07, what happens?
There was an incoming call again from, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Ms. Borcherding.
All right, so Ms. Brophy and Ms. Borcherding have a third call at 10:07, almost immediately following what must have been the termination of the second call.
Correct.
And how long did this third call end, or last, sorry?
1 minute and 16 seconds.
At what point was there another call on Ms. Brophy's phone records?
At 10:09 in the morning on June 2nd, 2018, there was outgoing call, again to the same phone number, Ms. Borcherding.
Okay,
So
so
they,
very shortly after the third call between Ms. Borcherding and Ms. Brophy terminates, there's a fourth call between the two of them?
yes, back and forth.
All right, and now we're at about 10:09 a.m.?
That's what I'm referring to, yes. So that would be 13 seconds long.
Okay, relatively short. And then, is there another call that morning?
Yes, at 10:14 in the morning, there's an outgoing call to an area code of 503 with a prefix 961.
And were you able to identify the party that was called at that point?
That phone number was not in the contacts list, so I wasn't able to identify that person.
All right, right. I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, thank you, Judge. Hi, Mr. Hively.
Hi.
I just want to ask you about that flash drive real quick. You talked about, it looked like the flash, I wasn't quite understanding, so if you can help me understand. At 9:02, there was activity on the computer because a flash drive had been plugged into it. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay. So that's, you can see on the computer that flash drive is being inserted into the computer at 9:02.
Correct.
Okay. And you said there was some movement of documents. Are you saying documents moved off of the flash drive onto the computer or vice versa?
No, nothing went from the flash drive to the computer.
Okay.
Documents were either copied or saved as onto the Lexar drive.
Okay. Were they deleted off of the computer or just like, it looked like a backup copy?
I didn't have any reason to believe that they were deleted.
Okay. So, and these are documents that seem to be related to some sort of writing as an author?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And so these are being copied or moved onto the flash drive, and then was there any other, this goes on for about 18 minutes?
Yes, the last document, nancybrophy.docx, was created around 9:20 in the morning, and that was actually saved from a previous document, which was, I believe, witchesbook1.dot, which is essentially a template document.
Okay. And could you see what was done on those documents?
No, I didn't look at any changes. I made an effort to. Sometimes with documents, if you have it set up properly, you can look at them and see previous versions. But I exported these out and looked, and they didn't have any previous versions available for review.
Okay, so you don't know if any changes were actually made?
Correct. And a couple of them, it happened so quickly, it was probably not likely that it did. But on the last one, it was created on June 2nd that morning at 9:20 from another document that was on the device. So that it was created, so in a sense, it was modified.
I see. But there's nothing that you could see that in that 18 minutes that Ms. Brophy was actually inputting any information into any of these documents? Or taking any out?
There was plenty of time to do that, but some of those records did show that they had been modified, but I couldn't tell you what those modifications were.
Right, and a modification would be something as simply as hitting the space bar and adding a space.
Absolutely.
But in this docx, this Nancy Brophy docx, don't really know what it was.
Well, I saw the first couple of lines has something to do with witches.
I see.
But I
Oh, that's
didn't.
what you're saying, it was sort of copied as like a template from another template.
Correct.
Okay, and this goes on for 18 minutes, and then there's no other activity that morning.
Well, for the 18 minutes, the number of documents were being accessed and modified and moved, yes.
Right, okay. And did you look at any activity on that computer before 8:48 a.m.?
Yes,
Well, was there any?
yes.
When was that?
Are you talking about the morning of June 2nd?
Yes.
Oh, okay, well, sure. Around 8:31 and 5 seconds, there was an event that indicated that it appeared that the machine had been awakened from sleep. There was a power management event that occurred. Within 3 minutes, the actual machine had a crash, and the restart manager had initiated, so the computer restarted around 8:34. And the next item that occurred was the email at 8:48.
Okay, so from everything that you looked at, it appeared the first time that computer was turned on that morning was at 8:31?
8:31 and 5 seconds, yes.
So did you look before 8:31 to see when that computer had gone to sleep?
I'm trying to remember what was before that. My goal is to try to determine when it was turned on, not when it went to sleep. So I know there were records, obviously, but I don't remember what they were.
Sure, and you mean like previous, like,
Yes,
yeah, okay. But on June 2nd, the first activity that you see is 8:31 in the morning.
with user interaction, yes.
Right. Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
All right, redirect.
I've got nothing further. Thank you.
All right, may the witness be excused. Both sides?
He's not under our subpoena.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Go ahead and step down. I think it probably does not make sense to start another witness with only 5 minutes remaining, so why don't we break for the day, and we'll see everyone tomorrow.
Your Honor, we've got one quick matter for the court.
Okay, all right.
Willing to remain?
All rise.
All right, everyone can be seated. fine with me.
Your Honor, we have one witness under subpoena who has not shown up, and we're going to try to resolve that this evening. But with that exception, I think we are done calling witnesses, but we do have another number of exhibits that we still need to offer.
Okay.
Would it be appropriate to do that first thing in the morning tomorrow?
Yeah, let's do that so that we can all have a clear head and know what we're talking about. And can I ask that you let the state know which exhibits you're talking about, just so everyone has time to look at them and see whether or not there are objections.
We've done that, and Ms. Liu has sent us the most current list of what's actually been offered and admitted. So we're going to reconcile those and then
Okay.
talk with the state again. So.
Let's do this then. I'm going to ask that the attorneys be here at 10 till 9 tomorrow, just so we can get sort of a jump on that, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.